morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure this morning to introduce you to our speaker for this weekend, Kyler Barr. As many of you know, I have been taking our student ministry to Berea for the last 20 years for their winter retreat. I was surprised to learn this year as we were heading out that the speaker for that weekend was going to be the grandson of BBC member Lorraine Jackman. And he had attended BBC many times in the past. Our students had a great time getting to know Kyler, and he led one of the most impactful weekends that we've ever had at Berea. And we are so thankful that he is joining us here today. Kyler lives in Newtown, Connecticut with his wife Heather and their 4 sons. He has been serving in ministry to youth and young adults for 20 years in West Virginia and Connecticut. And Kyler has served as the youth and young adult pastor at Walnut Hill Community Church in Connecticut before stepping into a regional focus supporting youth and young adult ministry across New England. Please join me in welcoming Kyler with us this morning.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. It is good to see you. As was shared, I've sat on that side many times. It's good to be up here and get to share with you all today. I want to start off by thanking you. I want to thank you, first of all, for having me. It's a privilege to be up here. As we said, it's great to get to talk at a place that you know, to share a message with people that you care for. And I've gotten to know many of you throughout the years, and you know my family even better. And that's the second part that I want to thank you for. I want to thank you for the blessing that this church has been to my family, especially after the passing of my grandfather, Larry Jackman, a couple years ago, but really throughout their time here. Many of you have been great friends to my grandparents. And it's been good to get to know you all and to be here together. And there are so many other families that could echo what I'm saying today. And so thank you for being the church that you are and caring for each other well. It was also, as was said here, great to get to know your students. It was good to be up at Deep Freeze at Berea with them. We talked about the many things in our life, the areas where we have a picture or an understanding that may not be quite right, something that needs to be shattered or broken apart so that God can put it back together, so that God can rebuild it the way that it should be. You've got a great group of students and leaders here, and man, it was a lot of fun getting to know them better. And I just want to thank your leaders. 20 years coming to Berea. Can we just give them a hand? Today, I get to help wrap up a 4-week series that you've been in on encountering God in creation. Now, I've been able to join you because services are online, and so it's been really enjoyable to get to come alongside this series and watch what God has been doing. I love this idea of slowing down and recognizing what God does as we encounter Him in creation. And in the first week of the series, Pastor David talked about the joy we experience when we encounter God in creation. We can draw close to God as we spend time with Him and start to see more and more about who He really is. His nature is revealed to us, as Pastor David read in Romans chapter 1. His invisibility, his invisible qualities are revealed to us through creation. And I love seeing the many, many ways that God does that. Pastor David highlighted walks in nature and spending time talking to God and hearing from God and spending time focusing on scriptures like Psalm 23. And for me, many times when I've needed to hear from God, I've taken a walk. And we'll hear about some of those today as we go on. The next week, we were challenged by Pastor Tom to remember that we were created not only to be connected with all the rest of creation, but to also care for that creation. God has entrusted us with the care of His creation. He's counting on us to be faithful stewards. If we love God, if we are His people, then we will value the things that He has created. And this is not just the responsibility of the few. It's the responsibility of each one of us. And then last week, you got to hear from Pastor Jonathan as he drew our attention to the things that we can learn from creation. He asked us and reminded us to focus on the flowers, to learn from the flowers. He pointed to Jesus' call to note the flowers whenever we're pulled toward worry or toward anxiety. And he shared that creation teaches us amazing truths. I wrote down some of them that I heard in that sermon. God can be trusted. We cannot control everything. We need to stay connected. We are loved by God, and he is enough. There is so much that we can learn. This morning, as we wrap up the series, I want us to pause and just ask one more time what it is that we can learn from creation, about who God is, about who he's created us to be, and about how he's at work in the world around us. I want us to slow down and consider creation and ask this question. When we encounter God in creation, what do we find? What is it that we encounter when we encounter God in creation? We're going to be in the Psalms this morning. We're going to start in Psalm 19. And so if you have your Bibles, you can flip to Psalm 19 with me. We're going to be looking at verses 1 through 4. In Psalm 19, 1 through 4, it says, "The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship. Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. They speak without a sound or word. Their voice is never heard, yet their message has gone throughout the earth and their words to all the world." We see that not only does creation reveal God to us broadly, but creation here in Psalm 19 actually reveals something specific to us about God. We see his glory. Creation proclaims the glory of God. We sang about that this morning, this King of glory. When we encounter God in creation, we find glory. Now, this word that's translated glory is kabod. Kabod is really this bigger picture. It's not a light word. It's talking about weight or splendor or copiousness, if you look at the definition. It's a word that has oomph, right? It's a lot packed into this one little word. To recognize God's glory is to catch a glimpse, just a glimpse of the awesomely vast greatness and goodness of God. And one of the ways I want to highlight this morning that God is revealed through creation, that his glory is revealed through creation, is in the variety of things that God has created. There are so many different things in our world. We see this as we turn to Psalm 104 that we had the responsive reading built from this morning. In Psalm 104, verse 24, we see, "O Lord, what a variety of things you have made. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Here is the ocean, vast and wide, teeming with life of every kind, both large and small. See the ships sailing along, and Leviathan, which you made to play in the sea. They all depend on you to give them food as they need it." Now, as I look at this passage, I see a couple of different things here. This ocean, this one small piece of all that God has created, is teeming with life. But not just with life, with a variety of life, with so many different things, big and small. And as we look at these things, all of them rely on God. From things that are too great for us to comprehend, to wrap our minds around fully, to small things that we take for granted. Everything relies on God, on who he is. For even the food they need to eat, all of our world relies on him. As I thought about that, as I was reading that passage, I was reminded of one of these walks in nature that I took. You see, I had just taken the position at Walnut Hill. I was stepping into the role as the youth and young adult pastor. We'd moved our family to Connecticut for this role. And we paused and took some time. Another staff member from the church and I went together to a camp in the Berkshires. And we were spending time there just asking God, what is it that you want these students to know? Why is it that you've brought me here? Why have you brought us together? What is it that you want us to do, God? And as we started looking for direction from him, there was a day that I was walking alone down by a pond. And as I was walking, I was just looking around me, and then my eyes were drawn to this mountain across the pond. Now, I don't often feel small. But as I was looking at that mountain that day, I was reminded how small I was. It wasn't a huge mountain, and yet I was reminded that I am so little. God reminded me that he created the mountain. And even that mountain is small compared to just other mountains, but also compared to the sky above it, and compared to the vast universe God has created, in which our world is just a speck. And God used that mountain to tell me to help youth and young adults see a bigger picture of who he is, to help to expand their view, to challenge them that no matter how big they think God is, he's bigger. I want to tell that same thing to you this morning. No matter how big you think our God is, no matter how many massive ways that you've seen his glory displayed, he is bigger. God is bigger than we think he is. But that wasn't all that God revealed to me on the walk that day. See, I started to take a couple steps backward as I was looking at that mountain, and with all of my grace and charm, I stumbled a little bit. And as I stumbled, I turned to catch my balance, and my eyes were drawn to a small clump of yellow flowers. They were beautiful. And in that moment, God just reminded me that it's more than just how big he is. The same God who created the massive mountain created that small clump of flowers and cared about it. This massive, powerful creator, God of the universe, took the time to create these small flowers that were beautiful and vibrant and mattered. And God used that moment to tell me to help students and young adults see a better picture of who God is. Because no matter how good you think God is, he's better. He is always good. He always loves us. God is better than we think he is. Now, as I continued to reflect on that day, on what God revealed to me in creation, it actually became something that was a guiding principle for me throughout ministry, not only in my time at Walnut Hill, but now as I've stepped into regional ministry to youth and young adults, this became a clarifying call for my ministry. I am called to help youth and young adults across New England see a bigger, better picture of who God is and who he created them to be. Can you imagine if we just glimpsed that bigger, better picture? Not just for our students, though. I would challenge you to glimpse that picture for your students, Brewster Baptist Church. But for all of us to catch a picture of God that's bigger and better than we imagine it to be, and be reminded that there's a bigger, better picture of who he created us to be also. I love coming to the Cape, at least in part because this is one of the places that God reminds me that I need a bigger, better picture of who he is. And I need a bigger, better picture of who he has created me to be. Most often that happens when I'm standing down on the beaches. I want you to help me out for just a moment. Think of your favorite beach. Let's stay here on the Cape because we all know there aren't better beaches. But your favorite beach here on the Cape, of all the beaches around us, which one's your favorite? You have it in mind? Okay, now I want you to share that beach with someone next to you. Just tell them which beach is your favorite of all the beaches on the Cape. All right. Did anyone say First Encounter? You got the wrong beach then. I'm sorry. First Encounter is my favorite beach. I've grown up going to First Encounter. I love that beach. In fact, I was engaged on First Encounter Beach 20 years ago this July 7th, 2003. And so there are lots of memories on First Encounter Beach. But as I think about why I love this beach so much, I love going to the bayside beaches at low tide and standing in the tidal pools and looking out across the ocean. As I do, I'm reminded that this bay that I'm looking at is part of a bigger ocean, and that God has created it all and is in control of it all. And I feel small. I feel humbled. I feel kind of like David must have felt when he was looking up at the night sky and wrote Psalm 8. So if you go to Psalm 8 in your Bibles, verse 3 and 4 say this: "When I look at the night sky and see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you set in place, what are mere mortals that you should think about them? Human beings that you should care for them." See, when I look at that bay and remember the ocean it's connected to, I'm humbled. God is so big. Who am I? And yet it doesn't stop there, because I'm reminded of the tidal pool I'm standing in and of the life that is within that the same God created and cares for, and I also feel honored. I feel honored that this incredible life all around me that is small but is valued, it means that God values me, that God created me, that God has purpose for me, and I remember just how much God does care for each of us. Seeing the greatness and goodness of God through creation gives me freedom to walk in humble confidence. To walk in humble confidence. See, there's humility because I know that everything is not about me and that everything doesn't rely on me. It seems obvious when I say it, right? But we need those reminders. I have a good friend whose wife will come up to him once in a while and just do this, right there. She's just saying, the world doesn't revolve around you. And it doesn't rely on you. Second one's even harder for me. I know it doesn't revolve around me, but I've got to fix all the problems, right? And so the world doesn't revolve around me, and everything doesn't rely on me either, but I also have confidence. I have confidence knowing that the God I serve, the God who knows me and loves me, is the one upon whom everything does rely. He is in control. And so I'm able, as I look at creation, to walk in humble confidence. Now, there was another change that brought about some additional humility in my life and some additional perspective, and it happened 17 years ago this past Wednesday. On May 3rd, 2006, I became a father. Becoming a parent changes your perspective. There's a bit of this is also how my perspective was changed on this beautiful piece of creation that God has all around us, on these beaches on the Cape, because I got to bring my boys to the beach for the first time. I have 4 sons now, and we've brought each of them to the beach to put their toes in the sand and to dip their feet in the water when they were babies, and we've continued to bring them out since. And as I do, I'm not just going to the beach for myself, I'm going to the beach and I get to see it through their eyes. It changes how I look at these things, because these kids that I have, these sons that I've been given, they need me to bring them to the beach and to show them God's creation and to help them learn how to interact with the world that He's created that's all around them. But I found that I need them too. My wife and I need them to show us to slow down and notice things. Things that maybe we've forgotten to pay attention to, or maybe things that we never noticed in the first place because they're looking at things through different eyes. And because of them, I can start to see things through a different lens. And I can see things through their eyes. Even now, as the boys are older, each member of our family sees things differently at the beach. I'll go down and I'm excited about one thing. I have something I want to show them or something I want to do, and yet what they're noticing is something completely different. And what they're focused on is something completely different. And I could be frustrated, but the reality is that we're better for it. We're better for it because we have a more robust picture of this creation that God has given us. We can see more things. We gain a more complete picture of just how big and how good God is when we can see things through this different perspective, and that is beautiful. And I just have sons. Some of you have daughters and see the world completely differently, or grandkids and see the world through another set of eyes. We all need each other to help us see this bigger, better picture of who God is. It's one of the reasons that I care so much about intergenerational ministry within the church. It's so important that we are connected to each other. Because those of you in older generations, our students and young adults need you. They need your perspective as they learn to engage their faith in the world around them. They need to learn from your experiences. They need the way that you look at the world to help them understand how maybe they can look at the world. But that's not all that happens. You need them too. Students and young adults in the room, you're needed because as you engage in this world and figure out your faith, you're going to remind people of things that they've forgotten to look at. And you may even see some things about God and who He is that they've never noticed. It's vital for our churches that we have both the older generations and the younger generations connected together. Because together, we have a bigger, better picture of who God is than we could ever have on our own. As someone who spends my life working with these youth and young adults, there's one more walk that I want to take you through. One more walk in nature that hopefully will be a reminder to you as you engage with students and young adults here at Brewster Baptist Church, as you are connected through intergenerational ministry. It was up at that same camp in the Berkshires, and I was actually not walking on my own this time. It was a silent hike that we took with a group of leaders on a leader retreat. We had student leaders gathered together, and we prayed and asked God, will you show us? Will you show us something of who you are as we hike? Will you reveal things to us, help us notice things? And then we walked in silence 45 minutes to the top of the hill, and there was a place there where we paused and reflected on what God had shown us. We shared with each other. We learned from each other. And as we did this, for me, one of the most significant things can be seen in the picture that you'll have on the screen. You see, we got to the top and we had just kind of hit that golden hour where the light is shining just right. And as I looked at not just the trees that you see here, but as I looked at the trees and the hills and the rocks, I noticed that so often my attention was being drawn to where the light was shining off of broken things. Trees that had fallen, jagged rocks, branches that were broken. And when the light shone off of those things, it was beautiful. Because it is beautiful when the light shines through broken things. God so often demonstrates beauty in the midst of brokenness. It's kind of like driftwood on the beach, right? If you're walking on the beach like me, you're always looking for something, right? And when you find that piece of driftwood, it's been beaten up and it's been worn down. But when the light hits it just right, it's beautiful. But even more than that, when it's placed in the hands of a master artist and it's created into something new, it's formed into something new and beautiful that I couldn't have even imagined when I saw it laying there on the beach. Youth and young adults in our world today face a world that's full of brokenness and where things are worn down. Look, we all do. We know that. But it's at a particular time for our youth and our young adults where they're learning how to engage their faith in this world that's not even sure how it operates anymore. And there's a picture that they've been sold of what things should look like, how you can be successful and happy. And it's failing. And so in the midst of this brokenness, they need to experience hope. They need to experience the hope of Jesus in the midst of this brokenness and encounter him kind of like Paul did in 2 Corinthians 12. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul has been dealing with just a thorn, some sort of difficulty, a struggle that he has that just won't disappear. And he asks God to take it away, and God doesn't. And through that, God reminds him that he can be glad because in our weakness, in our brokenness, we see God at work, that Christ works through our weakness. When we are weak, we are strong because there's hope in Jesus. We need to shine the light of Jesus on the brokenness around us and on the brokenness in our own lives. We need to place ourselves in the hands of a master artist who knows how everything is supposed to fit together. God is at work all around us, bringing beauty in the midst of brokenness. And in our brokenness, we learn the same thing that we learn as we encounter God in creation. God is bigger and better than we could ever imagine, and he loves us. Now, as we wrap up this series, I want us to pause and ask how we can respond to that love. What is it that God wants us to do in light of what we've learned beyond just having a nice discussion? How can it impact how we live? And there may be lots of different answers for you, but can I suggest 2 places to start? The first place I want us to start is with intentionality, because without intentionality, so much for me just falls by the wayside. And the second one is gratitude. When we focus on intentionality, I'm going to challenge you each day this week to pray, to pause, and to take a picture. Pray, pause, take a picture. All right, I work with students all the time. Can we say it out loud together? Pray, pause, take a picture. Okay, so we're going to pray, we're going to pause, and we're going to take a picture. First, will you start each day with a simple prayer before you leave your home? It can be whatever version you want it to be, but something like this. God, will you help me to learn from your creation today? Will you show me a bigger, better picture of who you are and who you have created me to be? Second, will you pause as you go throughout the day and just take a moment to look at the world around you? Maybe you need to set an alarm on your phone or watch to remind you to lift your head up and look around. Or maybe you need to plan lunch outside or plan to take a walk through nature like we've talked about. Will you do something to help you intentionally focus on the world around you? And then finally, during one of those pauses, as God reveals something to you, as you notice something, will you take a picture? Will you get your camera out or your phone out and just take a photograph? See, this does 2 things. Number one, it's a reminder for you of the moment and of what God shared. Second, it can be an encouragement to the rest of us. You can encourage the church by sharing that picture. In fact, we've set up a way for you to share those photos with the church this week so that some of them can be posted on the church's social media. You can go to a link that we'll put on the screen that you'll have available to you. It's bit.ly/bigger-better-picture. And the capitals matter. Or, if that's not working, just go to Sharon@BrewsterBaptistChurch.org and send that email, because Sharon can handle all of it. We're good, okay? But the link will send you to a Google Drive where you can share that, and we'll be able to gather those pictures. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how God continues to reveal himself to us through creation as we pause this week. The second thing that I mentioned was gratitude. And this one I hope you do all week, but I also want us to start by doing it together here today. We want to give thanks for just how big and just how good our God is. Instead of closing with a prayer, I'd like us to close with a responsive reading. And so I'll ask you all to stand, and we are going to read Psalm 100 together. This is a psalm that's become very important to me. I read it at my grandfather's funeral, and I've been reading it since then all across New England, on the beaches and on the mountains and in churches and all over the place. And so we're going to read this together as our closing prayer. Shout with joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him singing with joy. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving. Go into his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For the Lord is good. His unfailing love continues forever, and his faithfulness continues to each generation. Amen.